going to be a very short introduction for Jeffrey Smith because he's so well known to this audience. He's the founder of the Institute for Responsible Technology. You can look it up at responsibletechnology.org. It's a very rich website that lists his various books and DVDs and programs that are available. He's spoken all over the world. He's recognized as one of the authorities not only to educating the public, but policymakers here and all over the world. Please welcome Jeffrey Smith.
Thank you so much. I love coming to Hawaii for so many reasons. I remember I was driving down the coast highway, and all of a sudden you get really close to the coast on the way to Haiku, and you see the surf coming, and I was watching myself react. There was this kind of uplifting nature in me that was greeting the uplifting nature out there. And sitting on Mark's patio and looking at the mist come in. Each angle of this beautiful place seems to sing inside of me. And I hear the same message from everyone that I talk to. And Alika just explained to me that the Aloha Aina and also Kale is a reciprocal relationship. We support and we love the Aina, and it receives that and supports and loves us. I'm going to talk about the need to protect nature from an unprecedented threat tonight. And I am going to ask, this is bold, I'm going to ask the Aina to support us, all of us who hear this. The message is intense, but the power that is available to us from the Aina is amazing. I need to say to you, for 23 years, I've been focusing on the health dangers of genetically engineered foods and exposing the corruption. And now I'm actually shifting gears. So I'm still going to show you an abbreviated version of what I would normally speak about for 45 minutes to an hour, because I still feel like there's a gift in it that some of you will leave here committed to eat more organic food. Because what we've been hearing is the impact of the drift of pesticides, and it may be difficult to fathom what you can do about it if you can't move away from that exposure. But you can move away from the exposure by eating organic, the internal exposure. So my map for tonight is to go quickly through some slides just so that I've done my job very quickly. And then I'm going to step into this new area. And before I proceed, I also want to thank Joe and Bruce and Satya and the 5 citizens that brought me here to help with the SHAKA movement 5 years ago, and Lauren, who put me up in his house many more years before that. And I have noticed, and I speak about it all over the world, I've been speaking about GMOs in 45 countries, I refer to the Hawaiian activism as one of the strongest in the world. Thank you. And, I could show up somewhere and send a note saying I'm coming somewhere and I'd like to speak, and they say, great, here's where you can rent a hall, and we'll see if we can get someone. Here, an ad here, and invitations, and speakers. It's just beautiful. And I'm wondering, why is it? Now, yes, of course, you guys are smashed by the biotech industry coming to enjoy the good weather and the triple season growing and the ability make mistakes here that won't go beyond the borders in theory. But I think actually it comes back to the Aloha Aina. It's in the laws. It's in the culture. And I had a chance, I was speaking with John Stokes, and I'm going to invite him up in a few minutes, along with Jeffrey, for a couple of days, learning more about the indigenous wisdom. And it is so far deeper into nature than we who have not grown up with that indigenous wisdom can imagine. The details, the depth, the connection, the reciprocity, the relationship, the wisdom, the details that are both mystical and spiritual and very practical. As Alika told me, when the mist is coming from the ocean in the last month before harvest, it makes the potatoes sweeter because they recognize that. So I think the power of this place is supported, is found in that Aloha Aina. And again, I am asking for more power from the Aina to fill our hearts as we hear in a few minutes about what we need to do to protect her. But first I'm going to do a little distraction away from that and just do my job to make sure that some of you change your life. And people come up to me all the time at conferences, all the time, and they stop me and they say, "You saved my life." Now, I didn't save their life. I gave them information. They saved their lives. So I'll have to give you some information so you can save your lives. Can you please show the slides just so we can get through this so that some lives can be saved? All right. What percentage of your diet is organic? How many people are between 0 and 20%? All told, including eating out at other people's houses and going out to restaurants. 0 to 20, raise your hand. No one wants to admit it. 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, 80 to 100. All right, so it was spread, but not so many people on the bottom. We're going to ask you your thoughts at the end. All right, if you had to rate GMOs versus, let's say, climate crisis as to which would be more serious, how many people view GMOs as less serious than climate crisis? Raise your hand. About the same, raise your hand. As more serious, raise your hand. Okay, that's interesting. That's the 7th out of 7 in terms of conferences that gave me that response. Okay, I've been asking audiences, when you switch to GMOs and organic, how many people noticed improvements? People would raise their hand. They'd tell me what they got better from. I'd say, how many people noticed that? And then I would take mental notes and see, oh yeah, the number one condition of improvement is always digestion, and then it's increased energy and reduced brain fog, and I got a sense of it over 150 lectures. So then I actually sent a survey out to 3,256 people, and they got better from the same conditions in the same relative frequencies. And digestive problems, 85% noticed an improvement. Fatigue, overweight, obesity, clouding or brain fog, anxiety, depression, food allergies, sensitivities, and we're over 50% still. So these are all the major conditions that people are experiencing, from Parkinson's at the bottom to diabetes, autism, etc. And people actually get better from these things, and significantly better, they say, just by changing their diet. And many of the people that are responding are not just individuals, but doctors who are describing what happened in their patients, and they have thousands of their patients, so they get a really big sample. Now, we've seen not only are people getting better from these things, but livestock when they're switched to non-GMO, pets when they're switched to organic. And when you think about the animals that are force-fed GMOs and Roundup that is sprayed on most GMOs in a laboratory setting, they suffer. They suffer from these similar diseases or their precursors. Now, Americans eat their weight, more than their weight, in GMOs each year. So you would think that it would have a big impact, and if GMOs were introduced, we would see an increase in these diseases, and we do. So I'm going to go through about 30 slides in about 90 seconds. All right? I'm just going to ask you to look at the slope. The red line is the amount of glyphosate-based herbicides sprayed on GMO soy and corn. And this is compared to those bars, which is the amount of inflammatory bowel disease in the United States. And it's a pretty tight slope. Now, this does not prove causation. But when you have all that other information that I just said, plus and we won't go into this tonight. This would be the other 45 minutes I'm going to lop off. If you look at the modes of action of Roundup, of GMOs, of the Bt toxin, you would predict this set of diseases. And we could talk about those for a long time. I'm not. There's worse information coming, and there's better information after that. Okay, I'm just going to read the top. You look at the slope. Deaths from intestinal infections. This is peritonitis, an inflammatory digestive tract disorder. This is acute kidney failure and death. Now that also has a blue line, which is the percentage of soy and corn that is genetically engineered. Hospitalizations from acute kidney injury. Hepatitis C. Autism of 6-year-olds. This is such a tight correlation. It's 0.9972. If it were perfect, it would be 1. Diabetes, dementia diagnosis. This is deaths from senile dementia. This is deaths from Alzheimer's. This is deaths from Parkinson's disease. This is deaths from obesity. This is deaths from hypertension. Whoops, something slipped. Insomnia, sleep disorders, celiac disease, birth defects, lipoprotein metabolism deaths, anxiety, suicide by overdose, schizophrenia, ADHD. World Health Organization determined that glyphosate causes cancer. This is breast cancer and glyphosate. This is bile duct and liver cancer, kidney and renal pelvic cancer, urinary bladder cancer. Whoops, it's jumping. Deaths from acute myeloid leukemia should come up right about now. Thyroid cancer. And we have discovered through the courts these 3 beautiful court cases where we won, and the juries were so convinced that Monsanto had the information and hid it from the public that their punitive damages were as high as $2 billion in the last court case. Let's give it up for that incredible opportunity. The judges brought the amount down, but there's 42,700 people waiting for their day in court, and the information that came out during those trials was simply breathtaking. And if you want to get some details, go to responsibletechnology.org and read and listen to the 5 or 6 part interview I have with the most amazing attorney, Brent Wisner. I was on national television with him for an hour on the Doctor's TV show. He's a firebrand, and you will love the interview at responsibletechnology.org. Now, we also have our Facebook page. I interview people, and this was a live Facebook with Dr. Skinner. He discovered that when you injected Roundup into the pregnant rats, they were okay, their offspring were okay, the grandchildren suffered, but the great-grandchildren suffered the most. There were changes that were epigenetic, and you could find those changes on the sperm cells, how they were passed on. And 90% of the great-grandchildren had serious diseases, prostate, kidney, problems with pregnancy, obesity. Really serious issues because we're talking about long-term effects. Now, unfortunately, Roundup is not just sprayed on Roundup-ready crops. It's also sprayed on rice, on wheat, on oats, on barley, on chickpeas, on lentils, on mung beans. Basically, the beans and the grains, it's sprayed in vineyards, so it's in wine. It's sprayed in orchards, so it's in orange juice. So I used to say eat non-GMO, and if you can eat organic, now I say eat organic. And only if you can't, at least eat non-GMO. Because we want to avoid the Roundup, absolutely very dangerous stuff. The Secret Ingredients movie, available outside. It is the single quickest conversion to organic. People ask me, how do I convince my mother, my son, my wife, my husband? I say, you can't. You're discredited because you're the husband or the wife or the father or the son or the daughter. Let me do it. Me and Amy Hart and I did this film. We've done pre and post tests. Show it to people. They will, almost everyone says they want to eat more organic afterwards because it shows people in the film switching to organic. Autistic boys no longer autistic. 92 infertile couples no longer infertile, all have children. People with cancer, skin conditions, etc. The doctors explain that this is typical in their practices. The scientists explain why. I was asked by Mark to include this slide. I was talking to him about something that I've been doing. People ask me for years, in addition to avoiding GMOs, what else can I do? I'd always say it was above my pay grade. I'm not qualified to answer the question, but I'm way overqualified to ask the question. So I did. Of 18 experts, Dr. Mercola, Dr. Axe, Dietrich Klinghardt, fantastic doctors, top of the game. What do they do to help people detox, rebuild, and repair from exposure to GMOs and Roundup? And that's available, and there's a half-price offer out there to get the whole set. There's like 24 videos and a transcript, etc. Now, rate yourself what percentage of your diet will be organic after this brief 10-minute lopped off thing without any explanation of causation. You just gotta believe me. What's your percentage going to be? Let's see how good we did. Okay, let's see how effective we are. How many people plan to be 0 to 20%? Raise your hand. Okay, you got a couple. Okay, 20 to 40. That was a populated area before, just a few minutes ago. 40 to 60. Okay, some slowly, like, well, maybe I'll admit it. We got 3 there. 60 to 80. Okay, wow. 80 to 100. Wow. Give yourselves a hand. Now give me a hand that I could do that in 8 minutes. You see, the thing is, it's so easy. It's so easy. You can do it. We have a speaker training program on our site. You can grab these slides from our website. You can just show the film secret ingredients and bang, people will be stopping you in the hall saying, you saved my life. Now, let's talk about the new threat. Remember protectnaturenow.com. Protectnaturenow.com. We're going to cover this up right now, and then we're just going to talk. Now we want to invite the Einer to come in because this is going to get so beautiful, so powerful. Because we get to feel what the solutions are. We get to feel how we can be part of this. When you release a GMO in the environment, what happens? It's alive. It crosses, reproduces, passes on to the offspring. They reproduce, pass on to the offspring. The gene pool that was changed in the laboratory becomes the corrupted gene pool in nature. How do you clean it up? How do you clean up the released mosquitoes that contaminated the mosquito gene pool forever in 4 countries? Here, mosquito, here. You can't do it. What about the corn that has contaminated the gene pool of the corn, the genetically engineered varieties? Can't do it. It's irreversible. When you do the genetic engineering in the laboratory, you make an intended change. If nothing else happened other than the intended change, there's high risks. Because we don't understand the vast orchestration of the DNA and the RNA and the proteins. We are babes in the woods, and the number one most common result of genetic engineering is surprise side effects. But it's not just a single change that happens. You end up with hundreds or thousands of mutations up and down the DNA, and that becomes part of the inherited gene pool. There are 11 genetically modified food crops commercialized. If we don't do something, it could be all of our food supply. It could be the bacteria, the algae, the fungus, the birds, the insects, the livestock, the pets. Everything or anything with DNA. and it is happening quickly. Gene editing, CRISPR, you've all heard of it. You can go on Amazon today and a gift for the holidays buy a do-it-yourself CRISPR kit for $159 and genetically engineer bacteria and then flush it down the toilet for an outdoor release. You can create your own lab for $2,000, but the big ones, the big groups, they're not just doing $2,000 labs. They have rows and rows of robotics driven by artificial intelligence to produce massive numbers of gene variations. We are at a time that was inevitable in human civilization, where we could change and reorder the codes of life and redirect the streams of evolution for all time. If we simply turn away, then we will not pass on to future generations the products of the billions of years of evolution. We will pass on to future generations the products of laboratory creations, whose number one most common result is surprise side effects. Ancient Ayurveda talks about how herbs work. They say the body is full of all the laws of nature, but some of those laws of nature are scattered through nature. And there's an herb over there that's the same laws of nature as created our ear. And if we have a problem with our ear, it's because the sequence of the laws of nature are somehow corrupted. So you take the herb, which has the sequence intact, and there's a resonance effect. That it corrects the sequence in you, health comes. Now that's the ancient understanding. Now we know that those herbs have RNA, which can change our DNA expression. It's not just vitamins and minerals and whatnot, it's also RNA. It's also RNA which is based on the sequence of the DNA that affects us. So that ancient understanding of the intelligence of food influencing the intelligence of our body has a scientific background. Kale from Hawaiian tradition told me 2 nights ago that that's also in the Hawaiian understanding. The quality of the food affects the quality of the human being. If we change that sequence and it resonates, it may not be correcting our sequences, it may be damaging or destroying them, which could explain the list of some of these diseases. Now, how bad can it be? I'm going to give you 2 examples. These are the only 2 examples of genetically engineered bacteria I know about that were almost released. Well, there's 3 I'll talk about. One came from the EPA. Dr. Elaine Ingham heard from someone at the EPA that they released bacteria in one place and then set up monitoring stations 11 miles away to see if it spread. Every station in all directions found the bacteria. They continued to check for it year after year at further locations. It was found all over the planet. The reason why they told Elaine Ingham was because her graduate student, years before, had done an experiment on genetically engineered bacteria. The bacteria was created by scientists and approved by the EPA to be sent to farms around the country so that the farmers could mix the crop stubble instead of burning it, mix it with the bacteria, it turns it to alcohol. They could run their tractors on the alcohol, take the sludge at the bottom of the barrel, spread it on their field, and have fertilized fields. Well-meaning. Give independent, self-sufficient generation of energy and fertilizer, and you don't have to burn the crops and create air pollution. Well-meaning. 2 weeks later, they were going to release it to see how far it spread. And the 2 weeks before, the graduate student who had spread the sludge on some soil to test how it worked for growing wheat seeds came into the lab one day and noticed the wheat seeds were gone. The little sprouts were gone. It was all green slime. The bacteria had turned it to alcohol. The soil was infertile. It could not support life. What would have happened? Some say it could have ended the ability of the soil in North America to support growth of plants. But since bacteria goes around the world, maybe it would have been a cataclysm. And that experiment by that graduate student was not required. It wasn't asked for by the scientists. He needed it for his PhD. And it just so happens it stopped it. That was the second release of bacteria I had heard about. The first one was in the 80s. There is a superhero bacteria called Pseudomonas syringae. And it has a magic wand when it comes to water. It can line the water molecules up, and then it causes a refrigerator around it. It removes the heat around these lined up. It lines them up in the same crystalline structure as frost and snow, so it actually turns water into frost or freezes water at temperatures 40 degrees higher than it would normally. It is the center point of ice, of raindrops, it creates clouds, it creates snow. It's used in snowmaking. We didn't know all about this when they genetically engineered an impotent version to spray on strawberries. Well-meaning. Strawberries get destroyed in the frost. Spray it in California. If it works, they'll make a fortune. There'll be more strawberries for everyone. Strawberries will be cheaper. Well, they were forced to steam sterilize after they did their experiment. It was never released. The bacteria was designed to out-survive the natural version with a survival advantage so that it would push out the natural version. That bacteria is airborne. That bacteria is all over the place. What if the genetically engineered version got released and spread everywhere? The weather patterns all over the planet could be changed. Now I can talk about the salmon that was engineered and experimented with in tanks, where they lowered the amount of food, and these fast-growing, ravenous, genetically engineered frankenfish turned violent and cannibalistic and killed and ate their neighbors, forcing population crashes or complete extinctions in the tank. Another genetically engineered fish, which had a survival advantage or a mating advantage over the natural, but a slight disadvantage in survival rates of the offspring. The Purdue University scientists put a computer program together and ran it, and were surprised to find that when 60 of these fish were introduced into a population of 60,000, there was a complete extinction in 40 generations. We could talk about gene-edited hornless cattle, which when introduced, the scientists said, this is so perfect, it is such a success, it proves we don't need to have any regulation whatsoever on gene-edited animals. In the end of September, the FDA published a sequence information saying, guess what, guys, you missed something. When you slice the DNA, which is what they can do, sometimes a lot in the wrong place, but they'll eventually splice it, it'll reconnect, but sometimes grab DNA in the environment and stuff it into the mix. As the splice, maybe it's the spackling, to splice it up. It grabbed the bacteria that was used as part of the gene editing, and now every cell of those cows that are being developed into herds in Brazil have bacterial genes in them that have antibiotic resistance. which, if it transfers into pathogens, could create antibiotic-resistant diseases, which are responsible for tens of thousands of deaths and amputations. Gene-edited mice, when they sliced it, they do the gene editing in serum from cows or goats. Guess what? Random DNA floating around in a petri dish ended up packed into the DNA of the mice, including retroviruses. So now we can transfer diseases between species. I can tell you all those things and I can tell you the science, but I'll tell you something. I want you to hear from our new friend John Stokes, because he told me something that told me that the leaders, the seers of the Hawaiian people, knew about this long before I did, knew what was at stake, and knew what we needed to do. When I heard this from John, I didn't feel so alone. In fact, I felt like a latecomer being supported by all those that came before. So John was told something by an elder which rang the bell in my mind. Can you please share that, John? John is someone who's worked closely with the indigenous peoples in Hawaii, in Australia, in the Iroquois nations, and now all over South America. He's been doing this for decades, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know him over the last couple of days. Please welcome John Stokes.
Well, good evening, everyone. And I'm an old friend of Jeffrey Bronfman's, and I'm no stranger to the islands. I came in 1985 with Winona LaDuke to assist with the sovereignty movement. And my claim to fame was that I went to Kaho'olawe 2 times before I went to Ala Moana. I was part of lots of movements in the last 35 years. And I came to meet Jeffrey Smith at Jeffrey Bronfman's invitation. And I think I'll go right to the point of what Jeffrey wanted me to say, is that in 1991, an elder, a prominent elder from Hawaii, if it's okay, I won't say his name, pulled me aside and he said to me, I've seen that you're going to bring together a circle of people. And this circle of people is going to be very special. And you're going to have gatherings in the years 1993, 1995, 1997. And you will be done by the year 2000. Because shortly after that time, something is going to happen that will rock the world, and it will make this work very difficult. You will have your people in place at that time, and you will have 15 to 17 years to prepare yourselves, because at that time, the world is going to fall. And when the world falls, you will catch it on your hands, and you will stand it up in a good way. If you do your job correctly, we will have 2,000 years of peace. And if you fail, we will lose biological evolution as we know it. And I said, I'll try, Uncle. And for 30 years, 25, however many years, I carried that, and I did have those gatherings, and I did prepare that circle. And the people are in place. And we were ready. And when the year 2015, 2016 came, I had no idea what it meant that the world would fall. But I see it falling around us, and I know that we're going to catch it. I have no idea some of the things that Jeffrey talks about. And I'm happy that he's on duty with his knowledge and his caring, and all of you also. But I can share this with you that there's a belief among Native people, especially strong among the Iroquois Confederacy. I've been trained by the Mohawk people for the last 35 years in New York State. And one foundation of their culture is what they call Oendo Kaliwadekwa, the words that come before all else. And it's called the Thanksgiving Address. We have powerful hearts, our minds are powerful, and what the Iroquois found that was whenever they lost faith in nature, whenever they forgot to be grateful for everything that nature had for us, their world fell apart. And every time they came back to the understanding of gratitude and found that beautiful place that we have as human beings here on the earth, their world came back together. I have a lot of faith in the old people. I have a lot of faith in human beings. I have a lot of faith in gratitude. And I thank you all very much.
Where there's a lack of appreciation, there is destruction. I started out my talk about what happens to someone who comes to Hawaii based on my own experience and what I've heard. The appreciation comes with every view. It comes with the rainbows, which are so abundant, with the winds, with the ocean. It is a fundamental, apparently, to getting things right. The aloha aina, the reciprocity, part of that currency is appreciation and respect. I don't know exactly how we are going to protect nature, but I am sure we will. And I am so excited to be as if launching. I mean, we've just been talking about this for a couple of months, but it feels more like an initiation here on the island. Because it feels like we're so close to nature herself and to those people who are breathing in that nature that we have tremendous resources. I know from my own experience, working on this issue for 23 years, giving 1,000 lectures in 45 countries, and working on it full time, I have felt the support of nature. But I have not felt the intensity of nature like is found in Hawaii. So it is fitting that there is a group here, and we're going to ask for a group who may want to sit together to come up with some local island solutions that can be cookie-cuttered around the country and around the world. And we'll be asking for other ways that you can support, perhaps through financial contributions. And many people have specific skills. But I don't want to leave this as just what you can do. I'm learning this from people like John and the indigenous peoples that I meet around the world. It's as important as who we are, what we can be. And here, nature is asking for allies to catch the world and set it up right. The word biological evolution as we know it, I cannot think of a better description of the threat that I just described. The end of biological evolution as we know it. Seen in 1991 by an elder from Hawaii who set John and possibly others on track to protect nature. Like I said, I'm a latecomer to the party. That's one of the gifts that I got this weekend, was realizing I'm so not alone. There's so many and so much that is ready to support. Now we'll talk about in the solutions committee different things that can be done, the sprays that may be tested right on Maui right now, that are using RNA interference, which is designed to alter gene expression on contact, which has never been tested on human beings, so that if it actually gets on your skin and absorbed by your skin, it might change your genetic expression in ways that we do not know and do not know how to identify or test. Talk about uninformed consent. It may be that there's experiments going on to ultimately develop the insects that will carry viruses that will genetically engineer in the field, developed by the Department of Defense, still being worked on. There may be gene drives that people are doing right now, gene drives which not only pass on a trait, but they pass on the mechanism of the genetic engineering so that it passes it on to its offspring, so that every single offspring gets the trait that you want. Not just 50% from the mother and 50% from the father, but all of them. And what do they want to do? They want to create gene drives to wipe out species that they don't want forever. A certain mosquito species. Let's get rid of the rats because they're on certain islands they weren't supposed to be. How'd they get there? In the hulls of ships. How might they spread that gene drive? Maybe in the hulls of ships. So we end up wiping out a species in a, quote, non-target location. The world. We can talk about the amazing science fiction future that is now when it comes to genetic engineering and gene manipulation. And all that we will share with those people that want to figure out what are the legal possibilities. How do we assign liability? How do we deal with international trade? Is there something we could do on the level of state government, local government? What information do we need to spread? What do we use? How do we use social media? How do we engage and ask for the help and prayers of the indigenous communities, of the religious people, of the parents, of the animal rights groups, of the gardeners, of the bird watchers? As I'm speaking, you realize our numbers are great. Around 88 billion, almost 8 billion. We have actually everyone on our side. And many of the people are already organized. That whole group trying to save the planet from climate change, planetary survival, they could take this as an additional talking point and bring our materials out to millions of people in days. What I see is that we will convey the understanding to everyone that we are at the inevitable time in human civilization where we can change it for all future generations. And one would hope that we would have a balance of high morals and high ethics and a deep understanding of the impacts of changing DNA and long-term vision. But we all know we have the ethics and morals of Monsanto, corporations whose future vision is short-term profit and very little understanding of the impacts of the changes. And we want everyone to know. We want it in curriculum, in schools. We want institutional review boards and academic policies and scientific association policies to say no release, absolutely no release. Is it possible? It was actually in place. Years ago, when genetic engineering was created, the scientific community got together and said, oh my God, we're creating new species that have never been on the planet, that are not part of the evolutionary stream. Let us never release them until we have a lot more information. And who changed it? The profit motive individuals and companies based on lies, based on saying, oh, we solved that problem. It's predictable, it's safe. That rhetoric was back in the 70s, and it continues to resurface every decade, and now they're ushering in gene editing, saying the same thing, and there's dozens of studies that show it's not true. Here is one of the pieces of our power. I think everyone in this room can feel the gravity of what I've said. And it didn't take long. It took 8 minutes to change some people's digestive life. And in this case, it could probably take 8 to 10 minutes to realize, oh my God, we have a responsibility. And since I'm not talking about ending the practice of genetic engineering in labs, I'm not talking about depriving someone who has a defective gene from getting a correction as long as it's not inheritable and changes the human gene pool. I'm not talking about not allowing the development of certain drugs under very carefully controlled conditions with genetic engineering or using genetic engineering for research. I'm talking about not releasing it outdoors and not putting it in the food supply. And we can point to our history of the mistakes made and the incredible dangers and damages that has resulted already. But the theoretical problems from this gene editing, just looking at those two types of bacteria, the theoretical is just breathtaking. But the advantage is just in the few minutes. I'm guessing that everyone here realizes, oh my God, I would never want to release a GMO at this point. The story does not require a paradigm shift. It doesn't require learning new physics. It doesn't require a belief in climate theory. It's mathematics. It's arithmetic. It's taking, we know that if we have a risk from genetic engineering and we multiply the number of experiments and releases by 1,000, by 10,000, by 1,000,000, by 10 million, we're increasing the probability that those risks become reality. And we also realize that every single year we learn more about the DNA that we didn't know, more about the qualities of food. We know that broccoli sprouts have sulforaphane, which can cure or aid in 29 different conditions. Before we knew that, what if we genetically engineered it so it no longer produced that? We would never know that it had those values. And what are they doing? They're taking medicinal plants and pulling genes out and synthesizing them and putting them in bacteria or yeast to create the active ingredient. What are they missing? What are they missing? So, the advantage that we have is that it's easily conveyable. So people are asking, I'm quite sure, what can I do? We're going to put together Mark, others, Beth, and others are going to put together a little group of the Solutions Committee. What are our options in Maui? What are our options in Hawaii? And it's not just for people who are well-wishers, it's people who want to think together. Maybe you have some legal understanding or scientific understanding or social media understanding. I'd like to see a show of hands how many people would like to be part of the Solutions Committee. Please raise your hand. That's great. So there will be an opportunity to sign a clipboard in the back at the end. It will be called Solutions Committee. If it's not organized, it's being organized right now, as I'm saying. I think it's organized. And put your name and email so that we can have the world's first committee established here in Maui to figure out local and state solutions. So thank you for that. Let's give yourself an applause. The Institute for Responsible Technology pioneered the behavior change messaging, that's my institute, pioneered the behavior change messaging on health dangers of GMOs, because no other NGO or nonprofit was talking about the health dangers, and we saw a strategy to stop that GMOs through purchasing power, and it's working. 46% of Americans now seek non-GMO food. The food companies are rushing to get rid of GMOs. It has been a massive success. So I'm not scared of starting something new when we don't quite have all the pillars in place. And so we now are embarking on this new project to organize a global movement to protect nature now. And we do not have enough money to hire a single full-time person on this campaign, let alone all the people that we need. So one thing that you can do if you'd like is to make a donation. And in the spirit of Aloha Aina, I would like that donation to be carrying your spirit so that you realize by making that donation, you're actually joining the team. You're actually feeling like this is something that you can do. When you think about money, it's part of our time. It's part of our investment. So it's something you can do, is part of your time and part of your investment is going to support this. So as if your work in your own job is work for this, if part of that can be directed to our institute. And we are building a dream team. We realize this has to happen quickly. We want the best people on the planet. And we need the money to create the core to then expand to that level. And the last thing I want to say is this. There was a woman named Noli who started the GMO group in Kauai. And she was such a loving person. And she would appreciate and love everyone that came to work and help. And they met every single week for like 18 months. And they camped together and danced together. And they had a blast. We are celebrating the Aina. We are celebrating nature when we support her this way. We get to. It's an opportunity. We get to support all living beings and all future generations. Let's not do it with the heaviness of responsibility. Let's do it with the delight of being able to do something that no human in history has ever been able to do before, because no technology was ever so long-term dangerous than ever before. We get to protect everything and enjoy that reciprocity, stepping up. Think about the reciprocity you get now. I can tell you from my own experience, it's an advanced technique to step onto the platform saying, I am going to protect all living beings and all future generations. It is a blast to live with that buoyancy, with that support. So this is not a heavy duty, dangerous thing that, oh my God, this is something to work, to bring, you can, I know that in the traditional Hawaiian luau's and the meetings, and you bring food and there's dance and there's music. Make it fun. Who are you celebrating? If you're going to celebrate nature, protect nature, and structure it so that over time you don't end up losing people, but you end up gaining people because it's sticky, because it is so delicious to work with people who are so connected to the Aina and so connected and loving to each other. So Noli Hoi taught us that from Kauai years ago, and we will carry on her tradition. It has been an honor to come to Maui and Hawaii year after year, different times, and be greeted by such an awake consciousness. One of the most advanced groups against GMOs, sophisticated and organized in the world. You guys can celebrate your successes big time. I've been to many places, 45 countries, many times, many places in those countries, and you really rock it. So I want to thank you. I'm honored to be here. I will be available in the back to speak to you personally at the end, but I want to take questions first, and I want to thank you very much.